see what he can do in the midst of unbelievers, on the leading edge with his word, his power, his grace, and his mercy. For God's sakes, we're Lutheran. This is what we know.
What would you say would be the biggest obstacle that people have to overcome to be able to reach the groups that aren't in their main emphasis?
It really depends on the congregation, because I'll give you a good example. I also was mission executive in Northern Illinois district for over 12 years. We had a lot of congregations that were in the city of Chicago. And when those churches were planted, 40, 50, 70, over 100 years ago, it was one demographic in that community. They all looked like the people who were currently in the church.
Right.
But over time, Chicago changed, the neighborhoods changed, the people in the community changed. In some instances, you still had a majority white congregation, and now what is a majority Black or Hispanic or mixed neighborhood. So the people in the community look nothing like the people in the church. When you ask about hurdles, some of the hurdles are just simply, to be honest, is fear. We don't know these people. They don't look like us. We're afraid of them. There was one church in Chicago, and I won't tell the name of the church because it's not relevant, but I'll tell the story. Right. They were down to 15 to 20 people on a Sunday morning, and they were in a pretty rough part of Chicago in terms of neighborhood. They were a congregation that was so scared of the neighborhood, they would lock the doors on Sunday morning, and there was only one door that the members came in, and there was somebody who was at the door to make sure that only their members got in. They called the district and said, "Hey, we're dying. Can you help us?" And we showed up on Sunday too, and they wouldn't let us in because they didn't recognize us. But it was one of those things where I said, well, part of your problem is reminds me of the movie Sister Act. If you remember the first Sister Act, it was like that Catholic church where they had put bars up on the windows and they had locked off everybody from church to go, why is the community not coming? Well, you have made not only physical, but emotional barriers to say you're not welcome.
That's interesting. One of the barriers I see, one of the reasons I started this channel is because a lot of Black people have no idea about Lutheranism. A lot of, not just Black people, urban culture in a sense. And for me, it's a beautiful tradition. And a lot of times there's certain groups out there that only focus on negative things that happens within Lutheranism or the LCMS when it comes to race relations and things of that nature. But from my perspective, we still need to put a highlight on the things that are good, the clear proclamation of the gospel, law, gospel distinction, vocation, things like that also. So I created this to put a presence because, as I said, when I first became Lutheran, I couldn't find nobody who was reaching out directly to, the urban community in a sense. And not saying that has to be a direct focus, but when you first become Lutheran, you hear people saying two kinds of righteousness, the Ordo Salutis. Bro, I never heard that in my Baptist congregation. You know what I'm saying? Those words really aren't something that's going to gravitate me in. Now that I know them, they're beautiful truths, with two kinds of righteousness and the simul and things of that nature. So that's one of the obstacles I think is, there's a book by this pastor, Joe Bringen, he just wrote called The Ends of the LCMS. And it kind of ties a little bit into your profession, your expertise. I wanted your thought on it. He mentioned how in the past, Lutheran churches, they kind of took the ownership of planting churches on themselves. So if it's two Lutheran churches on the west side of town, they will work together to be able to plant a church, let's say, make it like a triangle over to the side over here. And he said that it sounds weird that the numbers are going down, but the answer to that is to plant more churches. What would you think about that dynamic in a sense? I mean, I know you have to have the people in those groups willing to reach out to the community, but it seems like that was more so the focus of the Lutheran church bodies back then, and he sees that as a possible goal.
Excuse me. So church planting, I would say sometimes is controversial because of what you just said. you have older established churches that go, why plant more? We have enough now, just make the ones we have work better.
Right.
But you have to think of church planting as, I love this analogy of Legos. Think of the Legos that have like 6 pegs on the Lego block.
Yeah.
When you go
I
to
stepped on one a second ago.
yeah, when you get those Legos and you go to an established church, think of the Legos as relationships, those pegs. When you've been in church for a while, all of your pegs are full because you have connections, deep connections in your congregation.
Right.
So when a new person comes in, you don't have room on your Lego peg to add a new relationship. So it makes it harder for new members to find a place in established congregations. If you start a church from scratch, you have a lot of people there who don't have those deep, lasting connections with the existing membership. They're all starting out together. So it's easier for those people to latch on and find a sense of belonging in a new church because there are not as many established relationships in a new church. Church planning and a growing church is all about relationships. I'm just starting a series on my podcast of looking at people who have drifted away from the church, and I ask, what are the common factors that are leading people away from the church? And number one is the members of the church lack authenticity. Now that may sound kind of condemning, but it's not.
Right.
Lifelong Christians don't sin like other people sin. They don't kind of understand sin the way the world does. Like, why does that person hooked up with, why is their marriage falling apart? Why are they alcoholics? Not that we don't have our problem,
right,
but they're probably not the same kind of problems that those who are not churched have. So when young people come, especially young people today, with all kinds of questions about, their sexual identity, about CRT, about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the church goes, those aren't the things that we wrote about in our confessions. We don't want to talk about those. Let's get back to the Book of Concord. Let's get back to what Scripture says. And like, yeah, but your church and your faith, your confession, even your life don't match with who you are. So you may be on Sunday morning, you may be the deacon of the church, but I see you on Saturday night, you are at the club and you bumping, and so the people see that who are not members are going, your life isn't, you're this holy guy on Sunday, but you're not quite as holy on Monday through Friday. They see that as inconsistent because we don't talk about the fact that, we struggle with issues too. So those who drifted away are looking for a church where they can feel like they can belong. And the biggest hurdle we have is established churches make it difficult for new people to find a sense of belonging. That's a long answer to your question, but
no, it definitely makes sense. I think a lot of us non-cradle Lutherans can relate to what you're saying.
Right.
Because if you're not showing up with 5 people with you, when you have your own community,
right,
you end up running into those barriers where it's not ill intent of the other group. It's just like you said, that's just, they already have their group.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a basketball team. We already have a center and a backup. I mean, hey, you can come sit down and watch if you like. Doesn't mean you're going to,
right,
get on the team, But like I love my church, but I'll admit it did take a while for me to feel included in a sense. Like, I was always good friends with my pastor, but like with people in the congregation, it kind of took a while for me to get invited to the fantasy football league, for me to get invited to and it wasn't as if everybody likes to throw racism out. That's always the reason. To me, it was just an aspect of they already had a team last year, the year before, they already have their people. And even if it's not full, I might not be the first person they think of to add in or this and that. But as I got to know them, those barriers came down a little bit. So I definitely can relate to what you said. And I think it's very accurate.
Yeah, you got to think of it almost as though, like you just said, if you've been to church for a while, you have insider language that you don't even know is insider language. Like when I walk into a church for the first time, they're like, we got men's Bible study. We invite all men. We're going to meet at Jim's house on Saturday at our normal time. Well,
Normal time.
I don't know. I don't know who Jim is. I don't know where Jim lives. I don't know what the normal time is. So you're not really asking me to be part of this. So I got to go find somebody who's a part of the men's Bible study and find out, first of all, who is Jim? Where does he live? And can I come to the Bible study? Because it sounds interesting to me, but the way your announcements are set up, you're not really looking for new people to be part of what you're doing because you're not designing your messaging for new people.
Yeah, that's interesting. Another aspect that was mentioned in this book, I interviewed him probably like a month ago. So a lot of stuff we covered and the topics that came up were interesting to me, but I could talk to you about it because you actually aren't writing a book with identifying the problems and giving possible solutions. You're kind of already out there working with these possible solutions and implementing them and seeing how realistic it can be.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like if someone said, there's world hunger. Well, just plant a tree and let people eat off of it. You'll get rid of the hunger in the community. It's like, okay, bro, that sounds great. So who's gonna water that plant? Who's gonna check the soil? Who's gonna, like, you're more so on that end where it's like, is this realistic?
Right.
Another thing he mentioned that was interesting that kind of plays into what I do in a sense in regards to the Wittenberg project I'm doing here right now, my work with the group Extranos, Christian Lutheran rapper Flame, is Joe Brien, he mentioned how, so during COVID, everybody got used to worshiping from home and stuff. You know, now that's not the main part I'm asking, but from that time till now, I've noticed a lot more Christian social media where you have young apologists or TikTok videos or YouTube shorts of people proclaiming their faith and pretty much doing evangelism and putting a shining mark on, yes, this is following the faith. This is Christ crucified. There's this. He was mentioning that we would like to see, or it would be very helpful if more Lutherans had got involved in that type of stuff, or if we start taking an interest in the social media avenues of reaching people. Not saying anything in regards to, as I mentioned before, people worshiping at home. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's when it started. Christians being more prevalent online. So you don't really see many Luther. I see LCMS, they have some things I see pop up on my little clips every now and then. But do you think that's a positive way to reach the youth in regards to the aspect of evangelism and getting the word out? Because I see it as a two-edged sword. It's kind of hard to draw them into the church when you're not talking to them face to face, when you're